Hari Om. Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste friends. Welcome to session 132 of Bhagavad Gita verse by verse. We have commenced study of chapter 18 known as Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. Today we are taking up verses 6 to 10 of this chapter for our study. Later, Kumari Vaibhavi is going to chant the verses that were discussed in the class. Before all that, Dr. Naitravati will revisit the verses we studied in our last episode. Over to you, Dr. Naitra, please.
Namaste. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. The last class dealt with the first 5 verses of the 18th chapter, which is the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and is also a big chapter consisting of 78 verses. Lord Krishna started his teaching to Arjuna from the second chapter, 11th verse onwards. The first chapter discussed about Arjuna, the soldier, getting converted as a disciple, and Krishna becomes Gita Acharya. Lord Krishna has used the well-known method of teaching referred to as Sankshepa Vistarabhya Bodhanam. First, he gives a bird's eye view, that is the first or the initial summarization called as Upakrama Sankshepa in the second chapter. Then Vistara or magnification of the teaching from 3rd to 17th chapter. Again, final or second summary in the 18th chapter called as Upasamhara Sankshepa. In the next slide, when we see the picture of Dakshinamurti, we see the right leg on the demon Apasmara of forgetfulness, emphasizing that we need to remember the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita and internalize it. The highest goal, spiritual wisdom, moksha, and that is through Jnanam by Guru Shastra Upadesha. And this is brought about in the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. This has been brought about by various shatakams with the central theme or the key message being Moksha Shastra. The Mahavakya, Tattvam Asi, refers to Jivatma Paramatma Aikyam. I am already that, and we need to remove the impurities surrounding this. Malam by Karma Yoga, Vikshepa, restless mind, needs to be prepared by meditation through Upasana Yoga, and then Jnana Yoga by going to a Guru and clearing all the doubts and attain spiritual wisdom. In addition to this, I have to commit to myself that I will do all that is necessary to achieve this. I should put all efforts along with the Lord's grace by having a mind based on good values. In the next slide, in spite of so many chapters of clear teaching, and that too coming from Sakshat Narayana himself, Arjuna manages to have doubt and asks the last question, which is a seed for the entire 18th chapter. Arjuna wanted sannyasa and he was waiting for Krishna to endorse sannyasa. So he wanted validation or endorsement to become an escapist sannyasa. So he asked the question, what is sannyasa? What is the difference between sannyasa and tyaga? In the 6th chapter, in the first 2 verses itself, Krishna said that monastic person is not a real sannyasi. Mere a kavi wearer is not a sannyasi. He said that a grahastha who gives up strong raga dvesha is sannyasa. That is, raga dvesha renunciation remaining in grahastha is sannyasa. In the next slide, 2nd and 3rd verses, Lord Krishna gives the opinion of some sages or scholars as to what is renunciation. Karmas are divided into 5 types. Nitya karma, that is compulsory duty. Kamya karma, optional activities. Nishiddha karma, prohibited activities. Prayashchita or remedial activities done to remedy a nishiddha karma. And finally, naimitika karma, occasional duties when the situation arises. In the next slide, there are 2 schools of thought. Some scholars say renunciation is giving up of 4 types of karma other than the first, nitya karma. Others say nitya, naimitika karma are compulsory. 2nd, 3rd, 4th can be given up, and that is called sannyasa. So when a person does nitya, naimitika karma without expecting any reward, it is called karma phala tyaga. So karma tyaga is sannyasa, karma phala tyaga is tyaga. In the next slide, nitya and naimitika karmas are pancha mahayajnas. They result in swarga prapti and chitta shuddhi prapti. So Panchamahayagna performed for material benefit, we get Swarga Prapti. The same thing without desiring the material benefit gives us Chitta Shuddhi. The compulsory duties, Nitya and Naimitika karma, must be done by everyone with the right attitude. What is that? That is the attitude of gratitude. So that I transform all mundane actions into spiritual practice. In the next slide, the third verse discusses whether the karma renunciation should be total or partial. This is again divided. Some say total karma renunciation is sannyasa, while the partial group says spiritual karma you keep, but the non-spiritual karma renunciation is sannyasa. In the next slide, Krishna gives his verdict in the fourth verse. There is no difference at all between sannyasa and tyaga. According to him, both are synonymous, and the renunciation is threefold. The fifth and the sixth verse actually forms the cornerstone of the 18th chapter. In the fifth verse, Krishna explains that sannyasa can be approached in two ways depending on the level of the student. One type is those people who have got jnana yogyata. They have a mature mind, a purified mind, a prepared mind. So they can take on a life without any relationship. Whereas a human mind, emotional mind, generally looks for relationship, and the health of that person's emotional mind is heavily dependent on the relationship. So the scriptures say that we should talk about sannyasa only to those people whose minds are ready. Otherwise, the sannyasa ashrama is a one-way traffic. It will be difficult. So never think of renouncing the religious way of life. It's a very important support for the emotional life. And therefore, Krishna says, Yajna, that is worship of the Lord, Dana, charity, tapah, austerity, simple life, are three basic religious disciplines which will prepare us for spiritual knowledge. And when we have spiritual knowledge, we should value the preparation also by Pavanani. Pavanani means purifying the mind, removing the emotional obstacles to Vedantic study. Shankaracharya further goes on to add that people are allowed to renounce all these three only after Jnana Yogyata Prapti. So in the next slide, in conclusion, 18th chapter is a second summary of Bhagavad Gita where Arjuna asks the last question in the hope of becoming an escapist sannyasa. And Lord Krishna emphasizes that sannyasa and tyaga are synonymous. He also describes the 5 types of karma, which are the prerequisites for a spiritual life. Hari Om. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Netravati, for giving us an excellent summary of the verses that we studied in the last class, and also to give us a nice introduction to the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. This is the second class on the 18th chapter. I will repeat what Nitra also had to say. This is the biggest chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The second biggest chapter was the second chapter with 72 verses. This has 78 verses. We are now able to see the beginning of the end. As already mentioned by Dr. Netravati, Shri Krishna follows a very traditional system of what is called Sankshepa, Vistara, and Sankshepa. Sankshepa means to give an overview of what we are going to study. And when that overview is coming in the beginning, it is called Upakrama. And when the whole class is summarized, it is Upasamhara. So in between, that means from the 3rd chapter to the 17th chapter is a Vistara, is an elaboration of the whole teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. So the 18th chapter is another summary, but you will see it is not just another summary. If you study the 18th chapter, you will see there are 2 distinct parts in the 18th chapter. The first half is a continuation of the 17th chapter, whereas the last half of the 18th chapter is one of the most wonderful summaries of the Bhagavad Gita, where Shri Krishna again and again summarizes 2 important sadhanas, Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga. And finally, he will summarize it in the wonderful 65th and 66th verse. These two verses are the very crucial verses. And finally, he will conclude, among other things, which is something all of us will be happy to hear, because Shri Krishna will tell all students of the Bhagavad Gita a promise. Shri Krishna gives a promise, and that is what we are going to see when we are completing this chapter. And the promise is, those of you who have studied the Bhagavad Gita, I promise you Swarga. You will have a good outcome after this life. And those who do my work, who are able to propagate this, you will become one with me. Now, if you see the first part, that means we are now looking at the initial part of the 18th chapter, and this will go on for the first 40 odd verses, which is actually a continuation of the 17th chapter. In the 17th chapter, in addition to that beautiful verse, Om Tat Sat, Shri Krishna deals with 5 topics. And each of these topics he divides into Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas on what is Shraddha, and that is how the 17th chapter got its title, about Ahara, Rajasic, tamasic, and satvik, Yajna, Dhana, tapah. So there is a lot of importance to Yajna, Dhana, tapah, and those things are going to be emphasized in the verses that we are going to study today. When we come to the 18th chapter, Shri Krishna adds another 6 topics. We are currently discussing the topic of Tyaga based on Arjuna's question. What is the difference between Tyaga and Sannyasa? Shri Krishna gives a very unique definition, as now rightly said by Dr. Netravati. Shri Krishna does not see any distinction between Tyaga and Sannyasa. Essentially, the Bhagavad Gita is a moksha shastra, not for sannyasis more than for grihasthas. It is for a person who, and so Shri Krishna does not want us to give up any of our responsibilities. He wants us to do all the responsibilities. In particular, Yajna, Dana, Tapaha should not be given up. Additionally, all of us have got so much work to do. He says, can you do that as karma yoga? And when you do it as karma yoga, it is a wonderful sadhana. The topics that we will be studying in addition to Tyaga as, what is this jnana? Who is this karta, the one who does action? What is buddhi, dhritihi, sukha? These are the 6 topics that you will see on the similar lines of the 17th chapter, which we will be studying in the 18th chapter. We will begin with the 6th verse today, and the 6th verse will be explained to us by Dr. Meenal. Dr. Meenal, please.
Namaste. Let us read the 6th verse of the 18th chapter. Etanyapitu karmani sangam tyaktva phalani cha kartavyani ti me partha nishchitam matamuttamam. So this verse means, renouncing attachment and the results, these actions alone are to be performed. This is my definite and supreme verdict, O Arjuna. Now let us see this verse in more detail. In this verse, Shri Krishna says, Arjuna, remember the important and basic religious activities that one has to do, and they include Yajna, Dana, and Tapa. Etani apitu karmani. These important religious disciplines or actions alone. Kartavyani. You must necessarily practice. So these actions of Yajna, Dana, and Tapa must always be performed. And when one practices these essential religious actions, our attitude should be Sangam Tyaktva. Have no attachment. Do not get attached even to the religious karmas. Some seekers enter into Yajna, Dana, and Tapa and remain there getting attached to these activities and their phalams or results and never go beyond it. Others never even reach there. Actually, the correct thing to do is to perform the essential religious actions of Yajna, Dana, and Tapa, then purify oneself, make oneself eligible for jnana, and then go on to the next step of Vedantic Vichara, which includes Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam. So treat these religious actions as a sadhana and not as an end in itself. Therefore, sangam tyaktva falani cha. Do not get attached to the results of this sadhana. The next slide, please, sir. What results is Sri Krishna referring to here? According to the scriptures, the three religious disciplines of Yajna, Dana and Tapah can produce two types of punyam. The first is the spiritual punyam and the second is material punyam. The former will give amanitvam, adambitvam, ahimsa, shanti, abhayam and sattva samshuddhi. All of these have been discussed previously in chapter numbers 13 and 16. And in the 16th chapter, Shri Krishna calls them as the Daivi Sampat. So Yajna, Dana and Tapah can give a seeker an inner transformation in the form of Chitta Shuddhi and Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti, which in turn will make a seeker eligible for obtaining Guru and then for scriptural study, that is Shastra, Shravanam, Mananam and Nidhidhyasanam, and then eventually eligible for Jnanam also. While the later, the material punyam will only give worldly pleasures and possessions, which are very transient and ephemeral. So Shri Krishna is telling Arjuna in this verse not to choose material phalam, as the material gains will come and go and they will not promote spiritual growth. So again, sangam tyaktva falani cha, one should choose wisely. The next slide, please, sir. Swami Paramarthananda ji gives an example of sandalwood here. There are some forest tribals who use sandalwood to cook food, that is as a fuel, because they do not know its true value, while an intelligent person understands the same sandalwood's value and treasures it for a better use. Therefore, one should not get attached to the materialistic rewards of these religious merits, but one must learn to overcome the materialistic temptations and accept the spiritual phalam or rewards instead. To be born human is a blessing, and one must make the best use of this opportunity by choosing the right path and making wise choices. As Sri Shankaracharya ji says in the third verse of Viveka Chudamani, Durlabham Trayame Vaida Devanugraha Hetukam Manushyatvam Mumukshatvam Mahapurusha Sanshrayaha. There are three things which are rare and require the grace of God. The first is being born as a human being. The second is developing interest in spirituality along with a conducive atmosphere for the same. And the third is Guru's grace to fulfill your spiritual urge. All these three require a tremendous punyam. So a true seeker must make good use of this human birth and make wise choices. And then finally, in this verse, Shri Krishna says, Iti nishchitam matamuttamam. This is my definite and best or the supreme verdict. So the next slide, please. What is Krishna's supreme verdict? That one should not give up on these three religious actions or sadhanas of Yajna, Dana and Tapah. Not only should a seeker follow these three, but these should be utilized for spiritual purposes rather than for their material benefits. And having made these observations, Sri Krishna is going to talk about the three types of renunciation in the upcoming next three verses. Thank you very much. Hari Om Tat Sat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Meena, for covering these verses so clearly. Now, this is my definite and supreme verdict. After making a nice discussion about various opinions on what is sannyasa, what is tyaga, Sri Krishna gives his message very clearly. And that is three things we cannot give up. Do not give up yajna, do not give up dana, do not give up tapah. Now, we are all devotees of Lord Krishna. So how do we bring yajna, dana and tapaha in our lives? Yajna means whatever action, I'm doing this action right now, can I do it as an offering to my Lord? Ishvara Arpana Baba, give my very best and don't look for any outcome. Let that be intrinsic, let the joy be fulfilled in doing that action. That means whatever action, you will realize Jnana Yoga is much easier than Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is something that we have an opportunity to do all the time. And from the mundane to the profound, any activity can be done as a yajna if you bring in all the qualities of Karma Yoga that we have studied before. So every action can be a yajna. Every moment of our life, we have an opportunity to make it a yajna when every karma becomes a yoga. What is dana? Dana does not mean I have to give charity all the time. Dana means giving of your time, giving of your attention, going an extra mile and not looking for anything in return as part of our daily life. That becomes dana. And what is tapaha? In our day-to-day life, you will experience unpleasant moments. That unpleasant moment, if you are able to take it with zero complaints, I have no complaints at all, I'm able to absorb that, that itself becomes a great tapaha. Very nicely brought out by Dr. Meenal. These are not ordinary sadhanas. Let us not exploit these sadhanas for material purposes. Of course, we can use them. Yajna, dana, tapaha will give us material benefits, but they can give us something far greater. They can give us jnana yogyata. And once they give us jnana yogyata, from nowhere, a guru comes into our lives. The scriptures comes into our life, and our whole lives can be transformed by doing a sadhana from a nishkama bhava. So Shri Krishna's message is very clear. Make every action a yoga. And if you have this, and this is my greatest teaching, and this is his emphasis. We will continue on the next chapter, which will be explained to us by Dr. Kiran. Dr. Kiran, please.
Hari Om, Gurubhyo Namaha. Niyatasya tu sannyasa karmana napapyate mohatasya parityaga tamatsa parikritataha. We have learned previously the erudite scholars' opinion of what is sannyasa and tyaga, and also Lord Krishna's supreme opinion or the knowledge. That is, it is not his own personal opinion, it is the distant from the Vedas. What he mentions very clearly, and we should understand, is that renunciation or sannyasa here does not mean renunciation of any activity. It is the renunciation of the karma phala. That is, we are entitled to do action, but results are multifactorial. This he has emphasized right from second chapter onwards. Such an action which is performed becomes yajna and in line with dharma. And here, Lord Krishna is talking about three types of sannyasas, that is satvika, rajasa, and tamasa. So here, sannyasa means renunciation of the phalam or the results. Next slide, please. And he says compulsorily we should not renunciate three things. That is yajna, dana, tapa. Yajna, as sir has explained beautifully, means it is pancha maha yajna and not it is rituals, etc. That means our everyday prayer, then respect to elders, gurus, and also service to our fellow beings and ultimately the nature. This, he says, has to be done compulsorily or niyataha. And some people, without knowing the long-term benefit, try to give up this. This is what he says as mohatasya. Out of delusion, they give up. So we have to study this in two aspects. One is what is tamasic renunciation. That means giving up of the karma, that is the above three, what I told, pancha mahayajna, dana, tapaha. These satvika karmas or these activities, giving up this is called as tamasic renunciation, because they don't understand the importance of this. Second, if you are ultimately, whether if you have to renunciate everything, then why not renunciate? There is something called renunciating some out of not understanding. That means, for example, during Ayyappa Mala, many of them, they give up liquor, they give up smoking and other things, but they are not giving up out of understanding. They are just giving out of some obligation. But even this is good. Even though it is temporarily is giving up, this is, even though he is doing it, it is good. But what Lord Krishna says is, you can give up this tamasic renunciation, but you should never give up this satvika karmas, that is prayer, and according to dharma, what we do, even after attaining jnana, we should never give up these things, because based on whichever dharma we are, we should perform. The Lord Krishna's, life itself is an example. He is already a gnani, but here he is in the, battlefield. So he says renunciating tamasic is okay. Renouncing Rajasic activity is also okay, but renouncing satvika karmas will be bad for him. Hence, satvika activity like puja, prayers, which helps in purification and obtain humility, should never be renounced. That is what he is telling, because Arjuna wanted to renounce or give up everything. Such a sannyasa who give up without understanding is called tamasic sannyasa. So ultimately, to put everything in a nutshell, he says we should perform the satvika karma, that is yajna, dana, tapah, for preparedness initially, and later on it comes out of us naturally out of gratitude. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kiran, for a nice explanation of this activity. So Krishna is very clear that we cannot give up yajna, dana, and tapaha. And if it is given up through ignorance, now he's beginning the classification of tyaga through tamasa, and then we will listen to the next speaker on Rajasic and satvik karma. It will be Dr. Anupama. Dr. Anupama, please.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, verse 8 and 9. There are three things to be remembered here. First, in Krishna's opinion, sannyasa and tyaga are synonymous. Second, the spiritual seeker discussed here is unprepared. That means he is not a sadhana chatushtaya sampanna. And thirdly, the dictum, niyata karma, is the most important spiritual sadhana for an unprepared seeker. Verse 8 is a description of Rajasa sannyasa. It goes like this: Dukkham ityeva yat karma kaya klesha bhayat tyajet sakritva rajasam tyagam naiva tyaga phalam labhet. This seeker knows that he is unprepared and is aware of the importance of nihita karma. Yet, his intense concern for bodily comfort, deha abhimana, renders a tamoguna-like inertia. Alasyam hi manushyanam sharirasto mahan ripuhu. This sadhaka is unprepared, but is he ignorant about the significance of sattvika karma? No. His attitude towards karma is dukkham iti eva. Therefore, Rajasic tapas is renunciation of karma due to fear of physical strain, kaya klesha bhayat, and the attitude that one's duties, the nitya, naimitya karmas, are just troublesome. So what is the result? He gets no tyaga palam. Naiva tyaga palam labhet. What is the palam of true tyaga? For an unprepared seeker, it is chitta shuddhi. For a prepared seeker, a vividisha sannyasi, by shravana and mananam, he gets jnanam. And for a wise person, a vidvat sannyasi, by nidithyasana, he becomes a jnana nishta and gets moksha. However, this Rajasa tyagi gets none of these. Verse 9 describes Sattvika Tyaga as the right form of sannyasa. Karyam ityeva yat karma niyatam kriyate Arjuna sangam tyaktva palam chaiva satyaga sattviko mataha. For the unprepared seeker, Sattvika sannyasa is performance of nitya karma without attachment to either the action or to oneself in the form of ahankara mamakara. Also, without anxiety regarding the results of action. It is an attitude of akarta abhokta. The sadhaka knows that he is not yet a sadhana chatushtaya sampanna. The most important word here is karyam. This means kartavyam eva iti. That is, with an attitude that I should do my duty with mindfulness. Yaha karyam niyatam kriyate. It is mandatory to perform my duty. The sadhaka knows satvika karma gives chitta shuddhi gives jnanam, and jnanam gives moksha. His attitude is karyam iti niyatam karma kriyate. Now, what is meant by niyatam karma? Satvika karmas like yajna, dana, and tapah, the pancha mahayajnas. These nitya karmas have two types of phalams. The first being the material phalam or svarga, and the second spiritual, that is chitta shuddhi. Now, if one is involved in so many activities, then what exactly is he renouncing? Krishna says, sangam tyaktva. Renounce attachment to both karma and karma phalam. Sarva dharman api parityajya. What is the result of satvika sannyasa? It is chitta shuddhi. Therefore, irrespective of material outcome, spiritual growth is assured. This means be independent of all external factors. In chapter 2, verse 48, we have heard Krishna describe karma yoga as yogastaha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddha siddhyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. So what is the inference here? Satvika sannyasa is karma yoga. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anupama, for giving us the meaning of these two verses. The first verse deals with what is this Rajasa Tyaga. A Rajasic person is guided by desire, and therefore the renunciation is also driven by desire. So there will be a renunciation of whatever you do not like, and then they do activities what they like. So particularly if it is uncomfortable for the body, this is not done. And this kind of a tyaga is called Rajasa Tyaga. What is Satvika Tyaga? Satvika Tyaga is none other than Karma Yoga. So Karma Yoga, according to Sri Krishna, and in the 18th chapter, again and again, Karma Yoga will come again. What we need to remember is, what do you mean by giving up the fruits of actions? Now, whenever we do actions, we are really looking for the outcome. But it only means, can I give in my very best? Can I give in my 100%? Let I do with all faith that all will be well. But I am not bound by the compulsion that I have to win or it should be this way. There is no binding factor which puts pressure on me that what will the outcome be. So I work on whatever I can do. I do it 100%, and then I leave the rest as my karma phala. Certainly, I will accept it. I will accept whatever is my karma phala. Now, recently we had Swamijis visiting us. These are very great people. What is karma phala tyaga? When they are given an opportunity to give their satsang, 100% they come, they give off their time very diligently, very professionally. But when they come, there is no set fee that I'm here for this period of time. This is going to be my fee. That is not there at all. And whatever is given as Guru Dakshina is accepted. Now, that can be a role model for us to understand what is karma phala tyaga. That means I have come here for a certain purpose. I'm going to be 100% professional, although I have not given a fee. But if people are volunteering for something that I have offered my service, now in that way, if I can serve, that is what is called satvika tyaga. We have one more verse on Satvika Tyaga, which will be explained to us by B.S. Kulkarni. Kulkarni, sir.
Hari Om, Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita commences with Arjuna's question about sannyasa and tyaga, word meaning of which more or less giving up all desires. But Bhagavan starts explaining his opinion from the 5th verse onwards, after presenting the opinion of the eminent scholars. Krishna's firm opinion that Yajna, Dana, and tapas, karma should not be abandoned and they should be performed without attachments to the fruits of action for mental purification. Further, he continued to explain three types of tyaga. They are tamasic, rajasic, and satvik. After explaining tamasic and rajasic in verse number 7 and 8, in previous sloka, Bhagavan explained that satvik tyagi has to perform the obligated duties, that is, duties of sadhana. It is a must and cannot be renounced. Abandonment of such actions block the free flow of own possibilities of evolution in their potential talents. In this verse, Bhagavan explaining the nature and qualities of satvik tyagi and his attitude towards the duties. First goes like this. Na dveshta kushalam karma kushalena nusajyatem tyagi sattvasama vishtaha medhavi chinna samshaya. Those who do not avoid disagreeable work, nor do they seek work agreeable, are the persons of satvik tyagi and are endowed with good qualities and have no doubts about the nature of work. Tyagi with the sattva samavishtaha, anvaya, tyagi with the sattva samavishtaha, medhavi and chinna samsriyaha, perform akusalam, not dveshta, and kusalam nanu sajjati. Now, Bhagavan is enumerating the qualities of nature of tyagi. Slide, sir. Sattvaha. A tyagi is endowed with the sattvic qualities away from the impurities of hatred, jealous, anger, passion, greed, etc. Samavishtaha. He is equanimous in performing his duties under all circumstances without feeling elated when going is good, not feeling dejected when it becomes tough. They are like the reeds in the sea, negotiating with every rise and fall of the wave. Medhavi. He is a sharp intellectual having a great understanding of situation, a clear vision in regard to the spiritual goal, and discriminating between the prayas and sreyas, a viveka shakti. Chinna samsayaha. No doubt about the spiritual goal, and he has cleared all his doubts during Shravana and Manana sadhanas. Na anusajjate, na anusajjate. He is not attached to the fruits of action, asangatvam. Tyagi, while performing the actions of obligatory duties or sadharma duties, he does his duties under all circumstances, agreeable or disagreeable, pleasant or unpleasant, rise and fall of happenings of the circumstances. Akushalam, he doesn't hate disagreeable actions and maintains equanimous mental state in all circumstances. Kushalam, while performing agreeable noble actions involving a self-discipline and moral values, he will not get attached to it. No ragadvisha towards allotted duties. We may quote some of the examples of satvik tyagis, like a King Harishchandra, who has to guard the graveyard without hating work of inferior types. A second example, another from the Mahabharata, Dharmaveda has to work as a butcher without getting attached to the fruits of action. A third from the Bharata from Ramayana, who maintained the entire kingdom in the name of King Rama without attachments to the kingly pleasures. I conclude this verse with a verse from the Mankutimana Kagga from DVG. Alabeku nagabeku, samate samavirabeku, palaya nerevalokade rasa hariyabeku, alaya nalugada bandaya kolatma virabeku, ತಿಳಿದವರ ಚರಿತವಿದು ಮಂಕುತಿಮ್ಮ. ಹರಿ ಓಂ ಶ್ರೀ ಗುರುಭ್ಯೋ ನಮಃ.
Thank you, Kulkarni sir, for a nice explanation of one more verse which talks about satvika tyaga. Ultimately, Sri Krishna wants us to have a clear vision and a clear purpose of life. All of us, sadhakas, students of the Bhagavad Gita, by now are clear. Our primary purpose in life is Parama Purushartha. I am here for moksha. Moksha is possible only through Guru and Shastra. Shastras become meaningful only if a person has got Jnana Yogyata. Jnana Yogyata is possible through the sadhana of Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga. And therefore, every opportunity in my life, every act that I do now becomes a sadhana, because our lives are so busy. We don't have time for anything else. But can I make every action that I do a karma yoga so that I get jnana yogyata, I get guru prapti, and I get jnana yoga, and then I get moksha. This is a clear vision and a clear purpose of life. And this is what Sri Krishna gives all those various description of a medhavi, a samshaya, one who's very clear about what you really want in life. With that, we have come to the end of the 5 verses for today's class. We will have a chanting of these 5 verses by Vaibhavi. Vaibhavi, please.
Hari Om. Etanyaphi tu karmani sangam tyaktva phalani cha kartavyani me partha nishchitam matamuttamam niyatasya tu sannyasah karmano nopapadyate mohatasya parityagaha tamasaf parikirtitaha dukkhametyeva yat karma kaya klesha bhayat tyajet sakritva rajasam tyagam naiva tyaga phalam labhet karyametyeva yat karma niyatam kriyate arjuna sangam tyaktva phalan chaiva satyagas satviko matah nadveshtya kushalam karma kushalena anushajjate tyagi satya samavishtaha medhavi chinna samshayah. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Tat Sat.
Thank you, Vaibhavi, for your melodious and flawless chanting. Thank you, all speakers, for a wonderful class. Thank you, friends, for your active participation. On Monday, 30th January 2023, let us log in for a new session 45 of Disha for the discovery of inner strength and happiness at 6:45 p.m. In this episode of Disha, we will continue our study of 10th chapter along with Tattva Bodha. With this, let us conclude today's session. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.